Learning to live for us requires a healthy, mature adult. So, what are some traits of these kinds of people? All right, if you're taking notes, get ready. Here we are. Number one, mature people use their spouse as a reflection of themselves. Did you get that? In other words, my mentor taught me something. She said to me a long time ago, Dr. Lori Gore, she said to me, I was complaining about Luella being a certain way. And Lori said to me, do you want to know why Luella is the way she is with you? And folks, I did. I told her. I said, I don't know why. And Lori said, well, why? And I said, because she grew up in an alcoholic home. She grew up in a lot of brokenness. And Lori was always gracious to me. She just smiled and she said, are you open to another perspective? Yes, ma'am. Of course, she's my teacher and mentor, right? And she said to me almost word for word, here's what I'm saying. She said to me, Rick, have you considered the possibility that Luella is the way she is with you because of how you are, listen to this phrase, as a way of being? Have you considered the possibility that Luella is the way she is with you because of how you are as a way of being? Novel idea that you can create in others who they are with you because of how you are as a way of being. She went on to say, she said, Rick, you taught Luella to be that way. You trained her to be that way. What would you expect her to do based on how you are? Novel idea. Now, Dr. Phil in his TV show says it a little differently and a little simply. He always says that we teach people how to be around us. And that's actually true. And so when I really got the depth of the truth of that message, I moved to humility. And I said to Lori, out of that humility now, because I knew she was right, I said, well, then how would I untrain her? And she said, that's simple. Change who you are as a way of being. And if you change who you are as a way of being, you'll untrain her. You know what I found out? It was actually true. As I started changing who I was and how I dealt with conflict, she started changing because I started changing me. I wasn't training her to be the old way. I was training her to be a different way. Now, this is the point that I'm trying to make. How would I know how I was being in a moment? And this is the point that I'm making. I needed a way to know how I was coming across. Of course, I could ask her, but it came up with something a little more, in my mind, profound than that. So I asked the question, how do you know what you look like? How do you know what you actually look like? And people always say, a mirror. And I go, wrong. Because you can also know what you look like by water, glass door, your car window, blacked out iPad screen. A lot of things tell you what you look like. So if we ask the question again, how do you know what you look like? The answer is simple, reflection. And this is the point that I'm making, that using your spouse as a reflection of yourself. What I realized was this. When we were talking about something or dealing with some issue, I was watching her body language. I'd watch her eyes. I'd listen to her tone. And if I saw her start to shut down or go silent or back away, or if I saw her start to get a little bit louder, I'd stop what I was doing in the moment. Because what I'm now doing is I'm using her as a reflection of me. In other words, maybe rather than blame her for how she is, maybe I'm creating it. So I used to go, hey, wait a minute. How am I coming across right now? And she might say, you really want to know? I go, I really want to know. She goes, manipulative. And I go, ooh, what am I doing that's sending you that message? And she said, well, Rick, you're doing A, B, C, and D, and that sends me the message you're being. And then I realized something. If what I'm doing is sending her the message of being manipulative, you know what I did in that moment? I asked her to forgive me. I would say, well, then forgive me. Because if I'm coming across as manipulative, I don't ever want to come across that way. Forgive me. I changed who I was. You see, mature people recognize that they can use their spouse as a reflection of how they're being in a moment. The teachable moment right out here. You can do that with your kids as well. If your kids are yelling and screaming and running from you, maybe, and you go chase them down and spank them because they didn't stay there and talk to you, you might want to ask them, why did they run? You might find out you're the one out of control. You were yelling, you were screaming, and you're big and they're little. What would you expect their brain to do? Their brain tells them, get away, get safe. We create a lot of that ourselves. And emotionally wellness, being emotionally well and healthy, these people begin to use others as a reflection of who they're being in a moment. If you're around me and you're attentive, you're listening, and you look like you feel safe and relaxed, it's because I create it. You create that for me as well. because we create in others who they are based on how they are in a relationship and have an interaction. So that's the first thing emotional wellness does. They use your spouse as a reflection of themselves. Secondly, and this is very important, you've got to develop good, healthy listening skills. You must develop listening skills because confiding is the key to bonding. We know that through brain research. And when couples get in conflict, they quit confiding in each other. If you don't listen to me, if you're not willing to hear me, if you're not willing to hear my thoughts and feelings, then I'm not going to share them with you anymore. You see, we have to listen for understanding. This is very important. You listen to understand. You don't listen to argue, to fight back. You don't listen to get more points in. You don't listen so that when you hear their argument, you could undo the argument. That's not listening. Listening is a gift that you give a relationship. In my mind, it's the greatest gift. I say this way: love listens, self talks. We need to begin to edit out that little voice in the back of your head that's always critical. Tell it to shut up and begin to listen, not for agreement, but to understand how things are for your spouse. Why do they do? Takes listening. And you listen for understanding, not agreement. And when you start to listen this way, you actually build deep levels of intimacy, because listening to someone, hearing how they think and feel, and honoring how they think and feel, respecting how they think and feel. Again, I also agree. What happens is you send the message, you matter. You have value. Your thoughts and feelings are important to me. That builds a really deep sense of usness. And so the second thing that emotionally mature people do, emotionally healthy people do in their marriages, is they develop really good listening skills. In our Relate Well program, we actually teach listening skills, communication skills, problem solving skills, and confiding skills, and emotional regulation skills. Because if you don't learn to emotionally regulate that lower brain, you're not going to listen real well. All right. Number 3 trait, emotional wellness in marriage. These folks develop the ability to actually see their partner's perspective. In other words, they don't only look at the world through their perspective. They're able to understand that there's only one reality, but there's different perspectives of one reality. And people understand the way you build a relationship with someone is when you take perspectives and put them together. We say it this way: when 2 perspectives come together, that creates understanding, and understanding creates a relationship. Sadly, in Western culture, I don't want to understand your perspective, but you are going to understand mine. I'm right, you're wrong. My perspective is right, your perspective is wrong. Could it be both your perspectives are right based on your perspective? That's all it is. But we don't want to consider another person's perspective to see the world that they see it. Doesn't mean I have to agree, but you cannot have a healthy relationship with someone if you're not willing to look at the world through their perspective. Because to agree, everybody's perspective is right. It's their perspectives. And I can never fully know Luella. She's my wife. I can fully grasp her perspective of things. I'm not her. I didn't grow up in her home. I didn't grow up with certain things. But I can seek to understand her perspective. And when I put her perspective and I connect it to mine, I have great understanding of our reality. And then we can make good decisions. And so emotional wellness in marriage is when both the partners develop the ability to see another person's, see their spouse's perspective, and they can honor it. They don't have to agree. But when they put the perspectives together, that sends a message: I get you. And they actually feel that you get them. At number 4, and this is very important, I alluded to it earlier, emotional wellness in marriage means the partners have developed self-awareness and self-control. Now, you can't have self-control until you developed self-awareness. So in the world of emotional intelligence, Daniel Goleman talks about the fundamental personal competencies of emotional intelligence. And he says there's 2 personal competencies, what you as an individual have to develop for yourself, all right? And those 2 personal competencies are self-awareness and self-control, self-management. Self-awareness is in the moment, you know why you're doing what you're doing. You can label the emotions you're feeling in that moment. You're aware of how I feel. You can label it, all right? You're emotionally present to yourself. And when I've developed self-awareness, then I can have self-management, self-control. I can stop myself from doing something. Emotional wellness in your marriage, these folks have developed the ability to be self-aware and have self-control. When they recognize, wow, I'm really angry right now and I'm yelling, I don't need to be angry and I don't need to be yelling. I'm going to stop this. And they stop it on their own. Why? Because they don't want to be that kind of a person. They want to be the mature adult. Next, and this is fundamental to our work and relate well, emotional wellness in marriage. These folks learn to live for us, not themselves. Sadly, today, marriage is more about living for myself, not us. Our culture doesn't value relationship. We value individual rights. We value hyper individualism. Problem is, hyper individualism increases immaturity, and it doesn't allow you to become a healthy, mature adult. So you can't live for an us. You only live for you. Living for yourself is primal. It's very primal. It's the lower order brain. Jay Shetty, in his book, Think Like a Monk, people know that name. Most people do. All the thousands videos he's put out there on YouTube on personal development and living a life of maturity and spirituality. But he says near the end of his book, he said, he learned living as a monk that the greatest life lesson he learned was this one principle. Mature people learn to live beyond themselves. They learn to live to serve others. So true. So very true. And mature people learn to live for us. Live for us, not yourself. When us wins, you both win. When us loses, you both lose. Takes two to make an us and one to kill it.